Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. That was probably one of the most emotionally charged matches I've watched Tottenham Hotspur take part in. Probably since the White Hart Lane finale, which of course, very different circumstances, a very different kind of loss involved in that. And yeah, I think I could tell. As soon as I turned up at the Amex Stadium, just talking to some of the club staff and just seeing their eyes, a lot of people with wet eyes kind of ahead of the account, and I guess it was just Piero Ventrone not being there probably was just such a strange feeling. Although he hadn't been at the last couple of games, but for them, this was someone that was just so in their daily routine, and I think with that as the context, it just makes what the team managed to achieve yesterday all the more impressive. It really was. We can talk about style of play, things like that, and all that. But when you put into context what happened that week, and I'm going to try and break it down for you exactly what's happened in recent days at the club. When you take it all into account, I just thought it was quite remarkable. Because to be honest, let's be honest, on a normal night, to take home all 3 points and a clean sheet from the Amex Stadium, which is a place that Spurs have struggled a lot at in recent years. There's been a lot of tight games. I know the last one was a little bit more comfortable that they played there, but ultimately this is a team, they won at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, didn't they, late on? So just to go there and come away with a 1-0 win, I think in normal circumstances would have been a good result. I think to do so against a Brighton team that is flying high this season, even though they lost their manager, hadn't lost at home at all yet, and if they'd won, would have drawn level with Spurs on points. I think that's an even better result. But I think to put in such a professional performance just 48 hours after they were told, or just over 48 hours after they were told that they'd lost Piero. Do you know what? I don't think you can get more of a fitting testament to the work he did. Not only to prepare these young players kind of off the pitch, but also, on the pitch, but also off the pitch as well. And that's the kind of thing with speaking to people that you hear about. And this man just was this incredible figure in their lives who would, just like this wise sage almost, that cared so much about them. And it's so at odds of what you think of, like this kind of almost the sense of an old school fitness coach, but he really was anything but old school in his methods. He didn't speak perfect English at all, but would just kind of using a phone and Google Translate would try and get across what he was wanting to say to players, and that kind of made them smile instantly. That just the fact that he was trying. It was called Prof, is what they called him, which is short for Professor Marine. Because of his past. I've written some pieces this week about him, honestly. Have a little look, or just anyone's pieces about him. His background is incredible. Was one of the most renowned fitness coaches in the world. He won the World Cup with Marcello Lippi's side. Was that 2006? I think was it. And then Juventus as well, titles galore with them. Obviously, knew Conte as a player. Then that was when their relationship started 30 years ago. But he was just always going around the club, checking people were okay, looking after them. Every single player we'll speak to has a story about Gianpiero Ventrone. Everyone. And you'll have noticed even those players who have left the club or on loan on social media, there was little kind of messages from them, the impact they've made. People like Galini sent a really nice message saying, essentially, in a world that is full of fake people in football, Prof, as he called him, is like one of the real people in football. Right, so to put things in context, so the timeline of events. I still can't believe he's only at the club for 10 months. Just talking to the players and people, and it's not even just players. He's just regular kind of run-of-the-mill staff that you guys probably wouldn't even know what they do in the club or their importance to things. They were all quite upset. You could see even 2 days later about it all. So yeah, it was. I remember actually. Yeah, there was a story about one player. I'm not going to name them, but one player lost a family member to obviously a bereavement, and Ventrone was there waiting at the entrance at Hotspur Way when they turned up the next day. He grabbed them by the arm, gave them a big hug, and led them through to Antonio Conte's office to kind of talk. He was just there for the players. He was always asking about their lives, always trying to give them advice, because this is a guy that had worked in Asia, across Europe, in various countries as well. He's only 61 years old, which is just, it's no age at all. He would have been 62 in December. Yeah, he was there for everyone, and I think that's why he got away with doing, kind of pushing them past their limits physically, and that was kind of what everything he did. Everything was about, all the players will say the same thing about pushing their limits and teaching them that they don't have to just stop at a certain level, and that's not just in their football and physical stuff, but also in their lives as well. He was a real, I guess, a life coach in a way as well. But yeah, behind the scenes, kind of his kindness to others was really masking the battle he was having with himself. He'd been suffering from leukemia for some time, I think a couple of years actually, but it was being managed. It was being controlled, and that was why, you saw him out there working. I would see him at every match. I'd see him out there in the warm-ups as well. He'd go up to each player. You'd see him kind of talking to all of them, and then he'd come, step back, watch them from afar, and he'd talk to people like Fabio Paratici on the sideline, other coaches, or Greta Steinson that's come in as well. He'd be talking to him as well. So it was being managed, and he was able to kind of carry on as it was. And obviously, someone that we've had leukemia in our family. And yeah, I know that it is something that, while horrific, there are certain kind of types of it that you can kind of manage and carry on while trying to treat it and everything. And this was clearly the case. And then he told Conte ahead of the North London derby that he had a fever and he wasn't feeling particularly well, and he felt that he should probably stay at home. So when he did that, few people actually thought much of it, because obviously it was all under control. Ventrone's main concern, I've got some quotes from Conte, he told me about it afterwards in the press conference. Ventrone's main concern that he was missing training. That was the big thing. He didn't want to let people down, and I think that's quite a measure of the man as well. He's dealing with leukemia, feeling rubbish because he's got a fever, but still kind of wanted to be there at Hotspur Way. But Conte told him, no, it's your health, go away and kind of and get better. And he went back to home to his doctors in Napoli, where he comes from, just to get things checked out. And he missed the trip to the Emirates Stadium, and then the flight to Frankfurt 48 hours later. His absence was felt by everyone because they're used to having him there and a part of every kind of bit of the routine. But I should stress, because I think to be fair, we felt it as journalists as well, and I saw a lot of people saying, and I saw comments on the last video, that like Conte's mood in the last press conference, the one before the game at Frankfurt, when I said that he wasn't quite himself, he was a little bit terse and irritable. Obviously, people were making the connection that was to do with this, and with Ventrone, and him feel bad. From what I understand, and also from what Conte said, actually, to be fair, he confirmed it as well. That wasn't the case. Nobody at that point thought anything was serious. It was just that he was feeling a bit rubbish, but they'd gone home just to double check on everything. Obviously, yes, Conte, without the man by his side that had been there for almost 30 years of his life, so of course that's a different thing. But yeah, from what I'm told, that wasn't really affecting his mood in that respect ahead of the game. But what did happen after the final whistle in Germany, word got to Conte. He learned that Ventrone's health had taken a serious downwards turn. So Spurs returned to Stansted Airport the following morning. It was the Wednesday morning, wasn't it? On the flight back, and literally later that evening, Ventrone had died. Just the aggressive nature of what suddenly happened with his leukemia. It's just that, and I think that's what I think that's really what affected everyone. Just suddenly, kind of him being ripped out of their day-to-day existence, and a guy that was such a part of their lives. And Conte, obviously, like I say, closer to him than anyone. And then he had to, on the Thursday morning, deliver the news, full of emotion himself, deliver that news to the players. You can imagine. You can imagine exactly what that would have been like. I think there was an attempt from some of the players to do some little kind of warm-ups and runs in training, but eventually I think they just cancelled training. It didn't happen on the Thursday. So it was only on Friday that they even kind of got their heads around trying to do some form of preparation for the game against Brighton, which, again, like I say, makes it all the more remarkable for me that they got through everything they got through and then going to the game. And yeah, wow. It was... it's just incredibly emotional. It's just it kind of took me back to my news days. Obviously, back in the day, I had to sit in some horrible things, inquests, things like that, court cases with terrible things that had happened, and being in that press conference kind of afterwards, I could just feel the weight of the emotion coming from Conte, but you could also feel it on the pitch as well. I should say that Conte, Daniel Levy, Fabio Paratici, and various members of the coaching staff were flying out today to go to the funeral, which is in Napoli. It's in a small church, San Luigi Gonzaga, which apparently has got a beautiful view. It looks out over Mount Vesuvius in Naples. And they're all set to return later this evening on Sunday. So just got essentially it's almost their day off, isn't it? And fitting it all in. Just I know obviously they want to be there. And I think the players, there was a thought of the players going as well, but the logistics of it all, and also security concerns and things like that, and I guess also an element of the focus being on this Premier League squad kind of suddenly turning up at a small church in Napoli. It was decided against that. It just became impossible, I think, for them to actually make that happen. So they'll pay their respects in their own ways. And, it was clear. Their emotion was clear. You don't even have to kind of wonder, really, because I think a lot of you would have also seen it on the pitch ahead of the game. The minute's applause was brilliantly observed. I kind of put that on Twitter. I had some people saying, "Oh, how can you not really well observe a minute's applause?" But you can. You can really, honestly. People will find a way. I've been at various kind of minute's applause before, where you've had people trying to shout over it, or you could look across and just literally see people not clapping. And this wasn't like this. The Brighton fans were superb. They were all clapping to a man or woman. And you could see on this, your screens, you would have seen it. Conte obviously unable to stop the tears coming out. He was getting upset down there, and some of those players I think were very close to it as well. And I must say, you'll always hear me praising the Tottenham fans, especially the away ones who kind of go all over the shop. They were, I think maybe they even surpassed their own incredibly high limits yesterday. They were magnificent. They were incredible. During that minute's applause, they were singing "There's Only One Gian Piero." They were holding up Italian flags. And I don't know whether it was on the big screen, I didn't see, but they got the sense, or they knew that Conte was getting upset on the sideline. And as the applause ended, they started to sing Antonio, his little song that they do. And that, you could see that meant a lot to him as well, that they kind of had his back, and he turned to them and put his hand up. They don't normally do that before kickoff in that way. Sometimes they do sing it, but mainly it's an in-game thing. But that was class. That was class. All of it, with Gian Piero on the big screen as well. It was all very, very perfectly, fittingly done. And then you probably would have seen after the game as well, when I'm talking about players paying their respects. Hugo Lloris walked over. There was a shirt, Spurs shirt that had Gian Piero on the back. Oh, sorry, before in the warm-up as well, they were all wearing shirts that I think said "Always in our hearts forever, Gian Piero." Something along those lines, the message. And then during the minute's applause, Alan Dixon, it's called the team manager, you'll see him on the touchline, is the big chap. He was holding up a shirt during the minute's applause that said Gian Piero on the back. And then after the game, Hugo Lloris went over and took that over to those brilliant travelling fans. And that was a moment that was just, honestly, it was thick with emotion. the connection that Lloris and the fans had in that moment. He looked like he was about to kind of go, and this is like a very serious kind of stoic character, and that's why he's kind of a leader. But he also, you saw the very human side to him as well in that moment, and the fans again, they're so kind of empathetic. They realise that, recognise that, and they began singing Gian Piero's name again. And that got to Lloris. He kind of started doing this over his heart, and also the club badge. Obviously, it's all in the same place. Doing that, and then kind of pointing to him and applauding. It was just a really lovely moment. I think afterwards that shirt was signed. I saw it on the Spurs tweeted out. I couldn't tell whether it was actually players or it looked like a lot of staff. I recognised some of the names on there. Whether it was staff members signed that one or whether the Spurs players did. I don't know whether that was going to end up being taken to the funeral, perhaps. I don't know. But yeah, it was remarkable, really. The whole thing, and it just, everything pointed towards the impact that this man, the 61-year-old Italian Gian Piero Ventrone, had on all of their lives. And you know, Matt Doherty, after the game when he did his club interview, watching that, you could see there was little moments where he was trying to hold it together as well. And what he said to Milesy, the club journalist, he said, "It's been tough. Gian Piero brought a smile to all of our faces. No matter whatever mood you were in, whenever you saw him, you couldn't help but have a joke with him or give him a hug, and then everything else was all right. We're really going to miss him, and it's been a tough week." And he was kind of asked, he felt like he was a friend as well to the players. And he said, "Well, yeah, because my kids came to pick me up from the training ground the other day. I think it was the Wednesday before the Arsenal game. So that would have been the day before he told Conte he had a fever. And Gian Piero was driving out behind us. My kids said, 'Daddy, is that your friend?' Normally, you'd just say, 'That's one of the coaches.' But no," I said, "Yeah, that's one of my friends." And that's what he was to us. He was more than a coach. He was a friend. He even texted me while I was away on international duty. It's been pretty tough for all of us. And you could see that. I saw the Sky, the Sky interview with with Harry Kane and Ryan Sessegnon. And obviously you saw Harry Kane start to tear up as well. And you know what? Credit to the Sky journalist. I don't know what his name was, but he realised in the moment, let's not push here. Let's switch quickly attention to Ryan Sessegnon and let kind of Harry almost compose himself. I thought that was really well handled. And from talking to those, I was in the press conference, but I know some of the journalists went to the mix zone, and there was a real range of kind of different ways of people dealing with it. There were some players that just really honestly couldn't bring themselves to talk about it. They were so devastated. There were others who wanted to say some put their tribute across, I guess, to Gian Piero. And again, I can only keep stressing just being able to play a Premier League football match within all of that context and environment. It's just remarkable. I've seen on social media, of course, it's social media, so some people are still complaining about little elements of the performance and things like that. And I am going to analyse the match still, but ultimately, it's kind of just meant so little. I was so impressed with the professional nature of the job Spurs did while trying to contain all of those emotions. It was incredible. And yeah, obviously Conte was more devastated than anyone. This is a guy that he knew for, 30 years. He'd been alongside. He'd coached him when he was a player at Juventus. He then went on his coaching journey with him in the early days. We initially thought it was just actually in Siena and then obviously at Spurs, but actually kind of told us later on that he was also with him at, I think it was Bari and Atalanta as well. I think with the other clubs that he was also at him. So he has been a constant in his life. And do you know what? I thought he handled the press conference afterwards magnificently. I thought he spoke so well and managed to keep all of his emotions in check so well. And and again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to let your emotions kind of go. And we know Conte's a very emotional guy, but I just think he got everything he wanted to say across, which was superb. So I started the press conference, and it's one of those difficult ones where I thought to myself, kind of, do I just purely ask about Gian Piero, or do I ask about the match, and then if he wants to talk about him, let him do it? Like I say, I've kind of been in a lot of these situations before, having to talk to grieving people when putting together tributes and things like that, and I've always felt the key is just to let them go at their pace, is not to push them in any direction you want them to go in. Just give them the option. So what I did was I kind of mixed the question a bit. So I said, obviously, Antonio, it's been such a difficult week with losing Piero. Just kind of how proud were you with your players and managing to somehow focus on this match? And that kind of gave him the option then if he wanted to talk about Piero or he wanted to talk about the match and just focus on football, it kind of gave him both. And yeah, he did. You could see there was it was heavy with this kind of sorrow, like shock, I think was still with him as well. But also, like I say, really clear and well spoken, kind of putting it into words. And this is what he said, his reply to me. I have to be honest, it was really, really difficult for us to be focused on the game because what happened in the last 3 days was incredible. I know that the situation was really problematic after the game against Frankfurt, but no one would expect this situation because no one knew something about his illness. It was an illness, but it was under control. And then it is very difficult because this situation hit me a lot on the emotional aspect. When this happens, it's very different to cover your feelings with the players. I think maybe that's difficult to cover your feelings with the players, with the people that work in Tottenham. At the same time, I've seen a lot of solidarity. The players were really devastated by the pain and the whole Tottenham environment. The feeling was really, really bad because in only 10 months, I think Piero went through the heart of everybody. They appreciated it because we're talking about a really big worker. For me, my opinion in his job, he is a scientist. I spoke with him last week on Thursday, the last time when I arrived at the training ground. He wanted to speak with me and to ask to stay at home because he had a bit of a fever. It was incredible because he was really, really worried about missing training. And I said, Piero, we're talking about your health. And at that moment, he told me about his illness. I said, this is your health. You have to try and have the right checks and don't worry. His first problem was about missing training. For this reason, I think he was in the heart of every single player. My players were really devastated by the pain, but in life, sometimes many situations happen, not only to us, but to many people. Life sometimes is not good. At the same time, you have to try to cope with this situation in the best possible way, and it has to be so for his family, for his wife, Cynthia, his son, Ivan, and his daughter, Martina. And then I'm sure that Piero will stay with us forever. Forever. I'm sure about this. There's some, in there he said about Piero telling him about his illness. There's some slight discrepancy there over, I think Conte did know about leukemia, I think, from what I've told by people kind of within the club, because they seem to be aware of it. So I think maybe that's just lost slightly in translation. But again, I don't want to delve into that. It's his kind of way of explaining the situation. And it was, like I said, it was a remarkable performance. And Conte told the players after the game, I've got the quotes later on that I'll say to you. He told the players how proud he was so proud to call them his squad, so proud to be their coach, and just how not only good players but top people they were, to be able to do that as well. Remarkable. He did. He will leave that. His kind of whole thing about his life, his kind of task in life, Piero, was to prepare players for what came next. And in a strange way, although his loss is going to leave a huge hole within the club, everything he's done, his lessons he imparted about football and life itself, will have probably prepared the players in the best possible way you can deal with such horrible circumstances. And that's a massive testament to him as well. So right. So let's talk about the match. The match itself, 4 changes Conte made to his team. We finally got to see the 3-5-2 as well from the beginning. I felt 2 of the most important changes were the wing backs. Real kind of freshness down the flanks as well. Ryan Sessegnon, it was his first start since the game against Leicester. Do you know what? It's quite interesting. The Spurs are unbeaten with Ryan Sessegnon in the starting lineup. I know they've only lost 2 games, but still. I think, his record is they've won 4 and drawn 1, and the draw was the one at Stamford Bridge when he started. I've said before, Conte's got really high hopes for me. He really was always impressed by the way that Sessegnon takes on tactical instructions. He's very disciplined. especially for a 22-year-old. You don't always get that. And presumably that's where he wants Jed Spence to be able to get and to trust him with that sort of stuff as well. It's no coincidence that you look at the games that Sessegnon started in under Conte. He's played against Chelsea. He started against Chelsea, Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal. And in those kind of big games, I think they've only lost to Chelsea, which was 9 months ago that he started in. 2-0 defeat at Stamford Bridge about 9 months ago. This latest performance I thought was very good. It was up there, and actually Sky Sports gave him man of the match as well. He was another 90 minutes, which was good for him as well. He was just like a machine getting up and down that left-hand side. He worked really hard in defence. There was a lot of good kind of defensive moments where he kind of took the ball and motored away with it, marshalled people out of play really well on a few occasions as well. Never really looked in danger too much. Obviously, a lot of their play, he also stayed quite compact at times. He would tuck in. His partnership with Ben Davies, I think, is a really good one. Ben Davies kind of being that experienced head alongside him, I think it also helps him out. And the two of them always look for each other with their passes, knowing the other, because Davies will sometimes overlap him as well, or he'll come inside. And he was a few times he got into areas where he fired in these really kind of low, teasing, dangerous crosses that actually I felt the attackers should have been in better positions for. There were a few times when it fizzed across that horrible area in front of the 6-yard box where it's just too far for the goalkeeper to come out. If a defender gets there, they maybe knock it into their own net. And it just needs attackers throwing themselves at it. And he was almost a bit let down, I felt, by some of the movement in those occasions. And one cross he did right at the start, which just perfectly typified the Conte way when it comes to wing-backs and the way it needs to work. It was like a deep cross to the back post. And Matt Doherty, steaming in from the other side, came in. And to be fair, he did as well as he probably could in the circumstances of trying to control his body. He kind of got it down. I think it bounced down and up over the crossbar, if I remember correctly. And, you know, I'll say it a billion times, is a reminder that Conte's system works best when you have natural flying wing-backs going down there. Ones that know what to do in the attacking areas. And I still maintain I don't think Conte's systems ever looked as good as it does when Matt Doherty plays. You know, Matt Doherty, look, he was rusty. He was very rusty at times. This is understandable for a man making his first competitive start since April the 9th. That, you know, fateful day when Matty Cash rammed into his leg. It was so cruel, that, because he'd been flying, hadn't he? He'd absolutely been flying, Doherty, at that point. And just his whole season was brought to a halt. Tore his medial collateral ligament in his knee. And yeah, he... I think the way I described this, I wrote this in my piece last night, which was, it was a late night. I was writing stuff about 4 a.m, just because of obviously having to get back in the car from Brighton before I could kind of write all my post-match stuff. So there's some strange things maybe went in my piece, and one of them, which I think it still holds, which is why I'm kind of repeating it now. I kind of see the Conte system, going into some plumbing terms here, with Emerson. It's a bit like having a blocked pipe within like a pressurised pipe system. Again, I know nothing about plumbing, so this could be utter garbage that I'm coming out with. So I kind of feel like you've got this system of pipes, and the Emerson pipe is blocked at the top. Let's call it the halfway line. It's blocked. And what that does, it just forces all the water or liquid or whatever to go back and always going down the pipes on that side. And that's what happens, because there's a bit of a dead end there and it just always has to go that way. It's a bit of pipe that doesn't quite work properly. It pushes everything up the other way. For me, when you have a natural wing back on that right-hand side, everything flows through as it should, down these 2 pipes. We'll call them, we'll call the flow chances. Chances created flow down both sides. And Spurs don't become predictable. It doesn't mean all their play is going to be heavy down one side. And yeah, it is. It's going to go both ways. That's such a weird analogy. The more I think about it, it's just weirder and weirder. But it is. It's essentially just means everything can flow properly in this system to where it needs to be, working up top. And again, That's not me having a massive go at Emerson. He does have his strengths, and I do think in the big matches against big opposition, you need a player like that with a slightly more defensive outlook. But it just, for me, it's like night and day, seeing the difference in how the system works with two players that attack, that have. Emerson attacks. That's unfair. He knows how to get into certain positions, but it's just what he does then when he gets into those positions that just kind of lets him down. And I just felt for Doherty, like I say, rusty, but he was always there, always available. Got into some really good positions as well, and just constantly there for them. And I think, whereas maybe Emerson will look to pass the ball off kind of a square pass to people often, because or maybe try a dribble that doesn't really go anywhere. I think Doherty is more precise and exact with what he wants to do. He'll play the ball and quickly run for a 1-2, or he'll try and get to the touchline and put a cross in. And yeah, some of his touches were really good, actually. His touches and spin and turning and going were really good. And also, just mainly the fact that he got 90 minutes under his belt would be a big confidence boost as well, because let's not forget, in that press conference out in Germany, Conte kind of chucked him under the bus again and said, he's still not the player he was and all of this and nowhere near. So I think to go out there, and especially because he hadn't been great on international duty, I felt this was a positive step in the right direction for him. And there was a moment late on which was just so perfect for him, and such a brilliant bit of play. So it was in the final minutes. It was really, really late on. Leandro Trossard had got into space in the box. There was a little move and the ball had kind of broken to him and he was running in and he was just winding up from about 8 yards. It's one of those where he connects with that ball. That's probably going into the goal. And he was just about to smash it. And out of nowhere, Matt Doherty slides in and makes a brilliant block. Absolutely stops the ball dead there, and Spurs clear it. And it was one of those. It was a match-winning tackle, because had that gone in, probably would have been a draw. Maybe even you could say momentum might have been with Brighton, and maybe in those last minutes they could have maybe nicked something more. It was just a huge tackle, and I think the players recognised that around him. And Eric Dyer went over and gave him the biggest bear hug. He absolutely kind of grabbed him. He was so kind of so happy with him. And yeah, it was a lovely moment, because for me, I think up to that point, it'd been a solid performance, but maybe the rustiness hadn't really helped and made him not stand out in particular. But that moment, that massive kind of indication that, I can defend as well, was big. And I think that's hopefully the confidence booster he takes in with him now. And I think Emerson will probably come in against Frankfurt, you'd think, because he will be fit and it'll be a week between games. I'd imagine he'll bring him in for the home game. But I think Doherty did enough, really. And I'm sure I saw some quotes, spoke to someone where he was praising Doherty and Basuma. So you'd imagine Doherty has now done enough to get in that team for certainly the Everton game and maybe the Man U one as well, just a couple of days after that. It's good. It's the road back for Matt Doherty as well, or Matthew, as Antonio Conte likes to call him. And with every passing minute, he'll get sharper and sharper. This is what they need. It's not rocket science. They really do need these minutes. So we got the 3-5-2. The fans have been calling for it. Let's be honest, the things that we call for as journalists and that fans call for as well, they don't always end up being the right thing. Sometimes we get something in our head that we really want to see. Maybe it's a partnership. I remember, was it last season or the one before? I remember, and I think the fans were up for this as well, thinking of what a midfield three would look like if you had Højbjerg, Lo Celso and Ondembele. And I remember thinking, that's going to be amazing. And then we saw it and it was rubbish. It was so bad. It just didn't work at all. I think it was in one of the European games. And was it the Europa League under Mourinho, perhaps? Maybe. I don't think it was Conference League. I feel like it was Europa League. And it was pants. It was so bad. So not often, but sometimes the things that we as journalists and fans think looks really obvious and should work, they don't. And that is, again, I guess that's going back to what Conte said about we don't see how things work in training sessions, and that he may have tried certain formations and partnerships and know they don't really work well. But yeah, I do. It's quite funny. But this was one. It did work. 3-5-2 looked good, especially the first half hour, I'd say. Conte kind of teased that it was coming at some point ahead of North London Derby and also out in Frankfurt as well. I think he also suggested it was on its way. But I think probably it did, in this sense, definitely made sense to put Yves Bissouma in against his old club. I always think playing them against one of their previous teams, especially the last one, brings that little bit extra bite to their performance, I think, as well, because obviously they want to prove that they were deserving of their move. And of course, the Amex Stadium, the pitch, he knows it like the back of his hand. And that, I think, was one of the things, I think, taking him as a weapon out of that Brighton team, because he'd always been a dangerous weapon against Spurs in the past. So have him out of it. I thought it gave them a lot of control in that first half hour or so. We saw Sonny had a really nice free kick. We finally got to see a Sonny direct free kick, which forced Sanchez into a save. Bentancur had that fizzing drive that actually led to the corner that Spurs kind of scored from. Matt Doherty had that chance as well. There were a few moments they got into good positions and probably should have done better with as well. So you just felt that. I think everyone was a little bit more comfortable with how much control they had on the pitch. And it's an interesting one because it's three similar-ish midfielders. So, again, it does put a lot of pressure on those wing-backs. But then the flip side to that is having players who will step back. And Højbjerg would often kind of tuck in on the right-hand side as well. It gives the wing-backs a bit more licence to go forward and maybe stay up there as well. And then we had the goal. So I do feel a little bit sorry for Harry Kane in that Erling Haaland's just been so remarkable, and his 15-goal start to the Premier League, obviously scored more in other competitions, it's kind of overshadowed the fact that Harry Kane, who's known for quite slow starts to campaigns, especially last season with everything that was going on, he's already got 8 goals to his name from the past 8 games in the Premier League, which is his joint best start to a Premier League season, I think. So kind of obviously everyone's focused on Haaland. They haven't actually kind of noticed that Kane is ticking along very nicely. He really is. And I'd say without hitting his top gear. I think there's more to come from Kane. And, he's only 9 goals away now from reaching 200 goals in the Premier League. Just 10 off Jimmy Greaves, 266 goals as well for Spurs. I should say, I know some people are a bit worried about him injury-wise because he made a really good kind of interception right at the end on the edge of the Spurs box. But I wonder whether it came from the Doherty challenge, whether it was that the ball squirmed across from that. I can't remember. But he got a massive kick in the back of his foot and he was properly limping, and you saw him kind of limping off afterwards. But he, from what I understand, told, I think maybe in a radio interview after, he said, no, I'm absolutely fine. It was just a kick. It's just a knock. So that's good. It'll be interesting though, because Conte's going to have to rest him at some point. He needs to have a match to kind of recharge. I just wonder when that's going to come. Because Kane wants to play every single game, but there has to be a point. Do you do it against Frankfurt, which is a big game, but it's at home, and Frankfurt, maybe having seen them in Germany, weren't as much of a threat, or they didn't seem to be as much. And maybe you play Richarlison up there, or do you do that against Everton at home with Richarlison up front against his old club? Yeah. It's interesting to see when that actually happens. I'd say after the goal, Spurs' performance became a bit more workmanlike. But like I say, in the circumstances, they had further chances, to be fair. And I think had Kane and Son been the Kane and Son of last season, there were a few moments where they swept away where, maybe the game could have been put out of sight by the hour mark or something like that. And obviously that would have, Brighton's late kind of moments of pressure wouldn't have been too big a deal. But, I was trying to think. Lloris made a few good saves. I remember one from Welbeck low down, possibly from Trossard as well. And he also dived really, I can't remember the substitute that came on for Brighton. He dived really bravely at his feet at one point and made a good brave save as well. But other than that, he didn't have he wasn't being peppered with shots or anything like that. I did feel Spurs control. I thought some of the defending was really, really good. I thought Dyer and Davies especially were excellent in the back three. I thought Romero is getting back to where he was. There's still some wild moments and lunges, and I think during that dribble actually of the Brighton sub that I'm trying to remember his name, is it Matomo, that Lloris got down to so well. I'm pretty sure I remember Romero just kind of being breezed quite easily past. Yeah, and he loves his runs up the pitch. Honestly, Guest to you, I do the podcast with Golden Guest Talk Tottenham. He's always going on about Romero just suddenly ending up at the other end of the pitch randomly and staying there. He does a bit like Serge Aurier used to do it as well. But yeah, I would say, I think in my ratings I gave him a 7 and I gave Davies and Dyer an 8 because I did feel that he just probably wasn't quite as solid on the day. But obviously we know his ceiling is probably higher than the other two. But I felt, didn't do really as well on the day. But still well enough. 7, 7's a good mark. I think average is 5, so that's a good one. Starting mark is 5. But yeah, I do feel like the 3-5-2 showed more promise. And of course, the knock-on effect obviously is giving Richarlison a bit of rest and having him as an option for Conte as the game went on, which he did. He changed back to the 3-4-3 later on. Freed up those wing backs, like I say, and I did feel it brought a little bit more out in moments of Højbjerg and Bentancur because of Basuma sitting there as like a shield behind them. Basuma himself, a bit like Doherty, I think he was rusty in moments. Another silly, needless yellow card for a late challenge, which was very, again, like he did against West Ham. So both starts have had kind of yellow cards within the first half hour, and I would say that this time I felt he dealt with it better than what I saw of the West Ham game. I think this one he was mature, made some really good defensive contributions. I felt there was a few moments where he kind of got in there and got the ball away from them. But like I say about Doherty, Basuma's another one who needs minutes. He needs minutes to sharpen up. He needs to kind of get that feeling back of the rhythm of playing stuff. And he's not there yet. He's not the player that was bossing the midfield for Brighton. He's not. But this was an encouraging start, I think. And I think he will have shown Conte that he can trust him as well. I think that was quite important. And we'll see a lot more of Basuma in these kind of months ahead of the World... this weeks ahead of the World Cup. Bentancur, I saw some people raving about him afterwards, journalists as well. I actually felt it could have quite a mixed game. I'd say in the first half, probably on the whole, I thought he was really good, had some excellent moments, but I did feel that he got quite sloppy with some of his passing and also his dribbling. He gave them the ball a fair few times. I looked at the stats. He had the lowest passing success rate of the three midfielders as well. There were just a few moments where, and this is what people would say do in Italy sometimes, you'd give the ball away in a little bit of a dangerous position, which allowed the other team to break towards the box, and he did. But I'd say still a plus, still more good than bad. But I would say for me on the day, I felt Højbjerg was clear in terms of, I thought it was a terrific performance, to be honest, from Højbjerg. Obviously, he was involved in the goal, a little deft kind of flick back to Son to ping it back in again. I didn't actually talk about the goal, did I? Is that obviously Son getting the ball back from his own corner from Højbjerg and then hit a kind of a low fizzed-in cross. It's one of those where I think some people were suggesting it was a shot. I think it was one who was just hitting it into the mixer, as it were. And Kane, we all thought it was a header, but I think some people were saying, I haven't seen a close enough replay since, but I think there's a sense that it came off of his back. And I think afterwards I saw a bit of his interview where he admitted it's just, when you're among the goals, sometimes these things happen. It just literally will bounce off you and go in. But obviously kind of got himself in there and angled himself towards it. So that was really good. But yeah, Højbjerg played his part in that. He was just constantly driving up and down. He was like an Energizer bunny. He was just constantly going up and down the pitch, playing all these quite nice little passing triangles with other players, getting forward, pushing them on. Like I say, he was covering for the wing backs, covering for the meandering Romero at times when he went up the pitch as well. It was so persistent in his pressing and the intensity. And actually, that was really good across the pitch, was a lot of the intensity as well. Again, when you're emotionally drained as well after the events of this week, I thought that was even more impressive. But yeah, there was one moment when Højbjerg was pressing so high up the pitch, he kind of got in the way of a clearance and the block flew just wide of the goal. It was almost a goal from that as well. He's such a leader on the pitch as well. He's an organiser. There was one moment he had a shout at Sonny. It was nothing bad. It wasn't like having a mass go at him, but he shouted at him because he could see that Sonny was having a bit of a chat with Harry Kane. and it was like the keeper was about to take the kick, and it was like you could see Højbjerg shouting to Sonny like, "Get back, get in position, like stop jabbering away, and come back and get in position and be ready where you needed to be in this." And Sonny, to be fair, Sonny instantly there was no like complaining on it, just immediately, "Oh yeah, it's my job," kind of thing. And I think that's one of Højbjerg's massive qualities. I do feel he's such an underrated player. I feel because he's not a sexy footballer, he's not going to do these incredible things on the ball. And there's occasionally moments where he looks a little bit clumsy. But I think he's one of those players where you take him out of the team and you miss him. You maybe don't. You're one of those where you don't know what you've got till it's gone, kind of thing. And I was looking at Spurs put out his stats just before I started this. Funny enough, 94 touches, 78 passes, 4 interceptions. He dominated the midfield at times. He really did, and especially with the pressure that Spurs were under, kind of later on as Brighton was really trying to sweep up the pitch. A lot of the good things came from Højbjerg getting the ball back and suddenly springing Spurs away in the opposite direction. I'd actually say, talking about Son, I did feel that he looked more comfortable in that strike pairing again with Kane. We know it's something that we've seen a lot of in the past, especially in the Mourinho era. And it's no coincidence, I don't think, that 3 goals came when he was in the 2. 3 goals against Leicester came when they were in a little pairing when they switched to a 3-5-2. No, it's not to say he's not great in a 3-4-3. I mean, he got the golden boot in a 3-4-3. So, clearly he's very versatile and can play in any position. But, yeah, I felt he looked quite dangerous. And his runs really put them on the back foot as well. Grabbed the assist, obviously, for the goal. He actually had another moment where he curled a beautiful shot into the corner as well, but he was just offside afterwards. The linesman put his flag up so late. There were still a few moments when he's getting caught in possession. There was one moment which was probably the most frustrating for the players, was that he broke towards the box and he had Cesc going down the left into the box and Kane going down the right. And for some reason, Sonny kind of think he saw them both, but he decided to try and cut in and go against. It was up against about 3 players. He ended up kind of losing the ball. Understandable, when you've got the quality of Sonny and you know that you can cut inside and curl a beauty inside the far corner, far post, I get the kind of desire to do that. But yeah, just in those little moments, I think at the moment when his confidence isn't sky high, I think it's in those little moments where I think top Sonny would have looked and quickly played that to Cesc or Kane. You could play that to Cesc, who's in the space, and that ball could have gone across to Kane, or even Sonny running in to then collect it back himself. And that'll come. Like, Sonny is class. He is just, again, don't doubt Sonny. But there's little moments like that I know he will analyse after the game, because like he said, he watches all of his performances back, and he'll watch that little moment back and think to himself, okay, next time that happens, I have to make the right decision there. It was a success on the whole. I felt the 3-5-2. It wasn't like an incredible game from start to finish, but I do feel like there was an incredible result, really, in the context of everything. And the 3-5-2, I did like it, and I think we'll see a lot more of it. And I do think you'll also see Skippy go in there as well at points. He came on later in the game, and I think in that 3, I think he'll be a vital cog in there as well, which is good, as they're going to have to keep rotating. This starts of the season, 20 points. 20 points from the first 9 games, just 1 defeat in the Premier League. Only once have they bettered that total after 9 games. That was 21 points under Poch in 2018-19 season. Do you remember that when they had such a good first half to the season, that the fact that the second half was naff in the Premier League, it kind of, I think it was the one, isn't it? They didn't win away since February or something, or once in February in months and months and months. It was that Fulham Harry Winks winner. But yeah, that season they were so good at the first half, and the second half they fell away so much. But because the start was so impressive, it kind of kept them up, and they finished 4th. So that's the only time they've got a better points total than they have right now. That's terrific. I think in those 9 games they lost 2 of them under Poch as well. So they've actually lost less games than they did as well. And I just think, again, I can only keep stressing, because it's so difficult to criticise elements of that performance because of the context that it was within. It just, I'm sure all of us have had to try and go into work at times after, we've suffered losses in life, bereavements and stuff, and But to go in and I guess to do that just over 48 hours after being told of someone that was so intrinsic to their daily lives that they'd gone, fair play. And like I say, fair play to those fans as well. They were incredible, the Tottenham fans. It's been a really cruel week for Tottenham Hotspur, but the players responded in the only way they know how, and the way that Piero Ventrone had prepared them. And I do think that was incredibly fitting. It really was. This was a little quote that kind of Conte signed off his answer to me. It might not be an answer to me. It might be one of the later ones. The press conference was all about Piero. It's one of those where, I know some other people that maybe weren't in the room would have said, I want to know about this, I want to know about that. But being in that room and like I say, the heavy sense of the emotion of it all and the emotion of Conte, it was a press conference to let him say what he wanted to say. So the questions were all kind of direct follows on from what he was saying and preparing the players for such a game, his memories and the impact that Piero had on his life as well. And yeah, I think it's the right way to do it. We've got plenty of opportunities to talk to Conte about the way that the tactical side of things and little things like that. And obviously we've got the press conference again Tuesday, so that'll be another one to talk to him about stuff as well. I feel like it might be Harry Kane, might be the player, possibly. I think that's kind of subject to change, but potentially it could be him on Tuesday as well. We get to see the open training in the morning, so I'll be able to tell you kind of who's still out, who's injured, whether Decky's back or not. And then the press, I think, is at 2:00 on Tuesday ahead of the Wednesday match. Actually, Wednesday match reminds me I've got to try and sort myself out getting into the Youth League game as well because I want to watch that as well. But yeah, this was the quote that Conte said at the end. I just thought it nicely summed up the way his feelings and the time about his players as well. I'm really proud of my players because I said to them, I knew that before I had good players, and I know I have really good persons, he said, people. Many times I repeated this concept. I think in these circumstances they showed to be really important people because I know I tried not to push them to play this game. Many times we've tried to find a motivation to push these players and to create a situation, increase the tension. Today, honestly, I did nothing under this aspect. I left them to face the situation and they showed me to be really good people, top men. I said that to them just now, that I'm proud to be the coach of this team. And I thought that was lovely. And that was a really kind of nice, fitting moment. And I do wonder, as horrible as this situation has been, sometimes in the worst situations, I think Conte kind of used the word as well, you find this solidarity. People come together in bad situations and you see the best of people as well, and the way they deal with things. And I just wonder, and I do think it'd be incredibly fitting, like I say, for a man whose whole sole object in life was to prepare these young players relatively to him for what comes next. I think it would be incredibly fitting that if there's anything that they kind of take from this horrible situation, it's to just become even closer as a group, I guess, and show that everything he did for them, Piero, was worthwhile and made them what they are and hopefully what they're to become. I think that'll be interesting to see in the weeks ahead how it works and how it all lays out in front of them. Such a bizarre time, such a difficult time. I looked at maybe doing a little kind of a loan roundup for those players not at the club, but obviously most of them, especially the ones abroad, playing today. The ones I just very quickly looked at before I started this, I know Troy Parrott scored for Preston, but he did also pick up an injury. So I've got to kind of find out what the latest is on that as well. He came off injured towards the end. Dane Scarlett got another 90 minutes under his belt for Portsmouth. Didn't score, but they keep saying such good things about him. They really do. I think they were the main couple that I saw. Various other players playing today. I think Tongi's starting to kind of... he's getting a bit of praise from the Italian media for what's happening at Napoli with him. He's starting to become a part of that team, which is great. Hopefully that kind of kicks on for him as well. Whether they, purely to kind of get him back on track, but also I guess for Spurs, if he's not likely to come back, it increases the chances, I guess, of Napoli making that deal a permanent one. But like I say, I should stress that all of those players on loan that I saw, they all responded about Piero on their various social media accounts as well, and that's the remarkable impact that guy had. Like Richarlison's message was this really lovely long one about, and bearing in mind he's known Piero since July, and it was a lovely thing all about how he used to joke. Piero Ventrone was joke with Richarlison that when he dyed his hair, it's like, oh, now we've got the same kind of colour hair and stuff like that. And all of them say the same about these life lessons that he gave them. Eric Dyer's is lovely, honestly. Look at Eric Dyer's long Instagram. That is the post of an incredibly mature individual, able to beautifully articulate what he wants to say. And just that connection was there. And to be fair, talk about articulate, all of them articulated their thoughts really, really well on the matter in such difficult circumstances. So, yeah, there you go. You can probably sense it was such a different game to cover. And that's why I just think the end result was all the more remarkable. And Spurs are in a good position in that table. They really are. The foundation for kind of what comes next has really been laid. And they're still maintained. They're going to get better. They're going to click fully. And maybe this 3-5-2, maybe this ends up being the thing that clicks everything into place and they get more and more comfortable in it. It'll be intriguing to see when he has Kulusevski back as well, and makes it maybe a little bit more difficult to try and cram everyone in that he wants to cram in. But, we mustn't forget that 3-4-3 with Kulusevski in it as well was very successful last season in that second half of the season. So it's not like the 3-4-3 is suddenly a horrible tactic. I think different games, different formations will work. But yeah, that was a big, I think, moment in just showing Conte that, okay, these players can play this formation. And that'll kind of be a big thing coming forward as well. So yeah, like I say, press conference on Tuesday, UEFA Youth League game, and the biggie, the Champions League match itself. Spurs win those next two Champions League games at home, and you think they're in control really in that group, and I think they're probably all but qualified. I am actually popping back to Tottenham Hotspur Stadium today. I'm going to watch my Giants playing for the first time ever live. I've never been able to watch them live, so that's going to be quite cool. And maybe get in the press conference and try and ask a question or two, which will be a strange scenario. Be a bit of a kind of I say a fanboy. Obviously, you know that I grew up a Tottenham fan, so obviously I am kind of Tottenham. It's in my blood, but I think I'm now at the stage with that where it is my job, and I do kind of see it in the way I interact with them and obviously they're lovely people. A lot of people I deal with, the players, staff, whatever, and Conte as well. But it is still, I know I'm doing my job. Whereas I guess if I do ask a question or two in the Giants press conference, and they bring a lot of players out as well as the coach, Brian Daboll, there maybe be a little fanboy element to it as well, just to say that I've done it, I guess. Silly little things, but there you go. Right, I'm going to head off now because I've got to head down there to the stadium. If you're there, please do say hello and give me a shout or a wave. And if not, I might see you at other games. So yeah, I'm going to head off now. Enjoy the rest of my Sunday, hopefully. And like I say, really tough week for Tottenham, but they dealt with it remarkably, and fair play to everyone involved. So there you go. Right, going to head off. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.